In this video, I'm going to discuss my rifle prep for American Standard Division at Woodland Brutality 2025. The rifle I wanted to use for Woodland Brutality 2025 was one of the new side-folding KP15 lowers with an FM Products upper. This is a bufferless upper that has a shortened bolt carrier group and a dual recoil spring system inside the upper. It does use a traditional direct impingement operating system. This particular upper is an intermediate length gas system. Intermediate length gas systems, for those who don't know, fall between the length of mid-length and rifle length gas systems. This particular upper does have a 16-inch barrel. The stage I'm using it on here, from Phoenix Rod and Gun to GACM, required carrying a kettlebell between positions. You could ground the kettlebell if you wanted to, but I opted to just hold on to it and shoot the rifle one-handed. This is actually a pretty good test to see how a rifle cycles and if you're going to encounter any short strokes. Because I'm using a lightweight minimalist buttstock, this rifle is a bit front heavy. The forward charging handle and everything being relocated to the upper receiver does change the balance of the gun. I generally don't care about this, but it does become pronounced on a stage like this where I'm shooting the rifle one-handed. You can see from the ejection pattern being forward at 1 to 2 o'clock that the bolt speed is pretty high on this particular rifle. On this stage, I start to have some problems that I'll later identify as the bolt not going quite all the way into battery. It manifests itself as a light primer strike because the hammer falling pushes the bolt the rest of the way forward into battery, and there's not quite enough energy left to actually strike the primer of the cartridge successfully. The cycling of this rifle feels almost like a short stroke compared to a traditional AR-15 because there's no buffer and bolt carrier reciprocating in the buttstock, and the overall mass that's reciprocating is much lower. So it is something you have to get used to if you're used to using traditional AR-15s. Another light primer strike there. Fortunately, just racking it once solved the problem. This stage required shooting with the support side shoulder towards the ground from this first position. This is another good test to see how your rifle will actually cycle under a variety of conditions. Successful hits there. Moving over now, I can use more traditional supported positions. Each subsequent position requires more hits per target. I do have a Surefire Warcomp Sport mounted to the end of the barrel. It doesn't have a lot of compensating effect, but it's enough that I can successfully hammer these targets once I'm locked in. So no further malfunctions at the match. I was able to win limited division at this match, which is roughly equivalent to our American Standard Division of Brutality. But I did want to go back to the range and try to diagnose what was going on. It looks like the bolt is not closing all the way into battery. You can see it's just that little bit there. And based on using this type of operating system later, I'm not convinced that it's not going into battery as much as it's going into battery and bouncing out. So after that testing, I replaced the bolt with a Young manufacturing bolt, and it appeared to resolve the issue. I didn't have any more out of battery problems after switching the bolt. I replaced the buttstock with a Lage side folder, which gives me a better cheek weld versus the skinnier one I was using before. And the added weight does help balance the rifle a bit more than with the skinnier, lighter stock. I've also mounted a lead and steel Pandora Generation 2 in a Reptilia mount. Because this upper is taller than traditional AR-15s and I can mount the buttstock slightly lower, this gives me a good cheek weld while minimizing bore offset. I also removed the backup iron sights from this rifle because I couldn't get any of them to zero successfully. Tried a few different sets and all of them ran out of elevation adjustment for the front post. Basically, unscrewing the front sight post almost all the way was not sufficient to actually zero for elevation. This match footage is from the Rio Slatto multi-gun match. This is held the second Saturday of every month at Rio Slatto Sportsman's Club. This is the last match in May I had the opportunity to shoot before driving out to Woodland Brutality. No problems with the rifle cycling as it should after swapping out the bolt for the Young manufacturing. And I think you can tell from the footage here that I'm more confident in using it at this point after the first match, some diagnostics, and some practice with it in between. Some close range paper here on this stage, and then moving on to rifle steel out to about 300 yards. Pretty happy using the Pandora as a primary rifle optic, particularly in this low configuration. It blends into the gun very well, and it feels natural to get on the stock behind it. the way I have this setup configured. The stage helps me verify that I can hit targets at distance on the clock at similar ranges that we'll be encountering at Woodland Brutality. So after this match, I feel confident in taking this rifle across the country to do American Standard Division. Ended up placing second in limited division at that particular match with 82.76% of the winner's score. Thank you for watching. If you like this kind of action shooting competition content, please come back for more. And always remember, the Second Amendment is for everyone.